Hello again. This is the fourth part of the story of Joseph. Thank you for listening so carefully and for sending me emails. The last time, Joseph's brothers had made up a lie. They told Jacob, their father, that Joseph had been killed by a wild animal, when actually they had sold him to traders who were on their way to Egypt. I left you with the question about whether it is better to own up to a lie. Does it make people trust you more? I liked what you said. You said, it might not make people trust you more, but you would feel better about yourself if you owned up. So it's time we get on with the story. If you're sitting comfortably, then I'll begin. The traders took Joseph to Egypt, and they found someone who was looking for a slave. His name was Potiphar. Potiphar was a really important man in Egypt. He was the captain of the Pharaoh's guard. A pharaoh is a king, and Potiphar was in charge of all his security forces. He kept the king safe. So the traders sold Joseph to Potiphar. Now, this is the first time in the story of Joseph when we hear about God. God is always there, working in the background, and God had plans for Joseph. God really wanted Joseph to be successful, and God made sure Joseph was indeed successful. Potiphar saw what a good job Joseph was doing, and he gave him more and more responsibilities. Every responsibility that Potiphar gave to Joseph became for Joseph an opportunity to impress Potiphar even more. Have you found that's the case at school or at home? When you do something really well, your mom or your dad or your teacher trusts you enough to reward you with even greater responsibilities. This is what the Bible says about Potiphar and Joseph. Potiphar left everything in Joseph's care and concerned himself with nothing but the food he ate. All Potiphar had to do was worry about what he was going to have for dinner. Joseph took care of everything else. Now, I haven't told you this about Joseph, but Joseph was very handsome. Potiphar was married to Zuleika, and Zuleika began to notice and like this important man who was doing more and more for her husband. So she began hanging around Joseph and following him as he went about his work. And that made Joseph feel very uncomfortable. The last thing Joseph wanted to do was make Potiphar jealous because his wife liked Joseph more than him. Joseph had had to deal with his brother's jealousy, and he had learned his lesson about jealous people. Well, one day, when no one else was in this house, it all came to a head. Zuleika grabbed Joseph by his cloak. It frightened Joseph so much that he slipped off his cloak and ran out of the house. And that made Zuleika really mad. She made a complete scene about Joseph running out of the house. She screamed and she screamed and she stomped her feet. And that went on until Potiphar came home. As soon as she heard him come into the house, Zuleika showed Potiphar Joseph's cloak and made up a story that Joseph had attacked her, which was the complete opposite of the truth. I don't think Potiphar completely believed her. If he had believed her, he would have ordered Joseph to be executed. Instead, he threw Joseph in a jail that was called the Round Tower. It wasn't Joseph's fault that he was now in jail. Joseph was a victim. Zuleika was to blame. But Joseph was the one who was suffering. Zuleika had ruined Joseph's life when he had been doing so well. Joseph was not expecting things to turn out this way. Now here's what I want you to talk about this week with whoever has been watching this with you. Do you remember that I told you God wanted Joseph to be successful? Do you remember that I told you God is always there in the background? Do you think God had changed his mind about Joseph? Do you think God let Joseph down? Do you think Joseph thought that God had let him down? Would you think God had let you down? If you have time to write me an email, I'd love to know what you think.